Scooby Doo, looking for you. Scooby Doo, where are you? All the stars are here, waiting for you. Couldn't have a show without you. Scooby Doo, Scooby Doo.
Hello, Scooby Doo fans! Welcome to my Season 2 Episode 1 review of the new Scooby Doo movies. So last time I continued my 2024 Scooby Month with a review of Season 1 Episode 16 of the new Scooby Doo movies. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I was very glad to finish Season 1. And we'll be beginning Season 2 now to end Scooby Month. Of course, I will continue doing more Scooby Doo reviews in October. As like I said, I won't have the Alien 1979 novelization review ready by the beginning of October. I'm still working on that, and I don't know about the Child's Play 2 review, novelization review yet. We'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, we're on to Season 2, and Season 2 is much shorter. Like Scooby Doo, Where Are You? It's a short season, so this shouldn't take long. It's about 8 episodes, so I don't think it should take long. It'll probably take, a couple weeks, and I'll probably have this banged out in a jiffy. But of course today, I'll be covering Season 2, Episode 1 of the new Scooby Doo movies, titled The Mystery of Haunted Island, which was released on September 8th, 1973. The short synopsis of the episode is, when they try to take a picnic cruise, the gang and the Harlem Globetrotters get tricked into going into Haunted Island. They soon run into a mystery, and it's keeping everyone awake. Today's guest stars are the Harlem Globetrotters. Now, this is an oddity, as, like I mentioned in the previous video, technically we have back-to-back episodes of the Harlem Globetrotters as the guest stars. They ended Season 1, and now they're beginning Season 2. My only guess as to why they made this weird and baffling decision is that maybe they wanted to ease audiences back into the new Scooby-Doo movies after the break they had between the seasons, because Season 1 ended right around Christmas time of 1972. It's now beginning of September of 1973. So they probably wanted to ease audiences back into the second season by having a familiar guest star. So maybe that's why they chose the Globetrotters. But still, it's very odd having them not only end the season, but then begin the next season. And this is the first time I'm going to have to first and probably only time I'm going to have to deal with, talking about a guest star in back-to-back episodes. But I'm still going to, do my normal thing of giving you guys an introduction of who the guest stars are. As like I said when I started the series, even if you guys know the guest stars, it's not meant to be in a demeaning or, I'm talking down to you kind of way. When I introduce the guest stars, I'm doing it for the people who aren't familiar with these guest stars, because these are old school guest stars. And yes, I did talk about the Globetrotters in detail in the last video, as well as in, my Season 1 Episode 12 review. But for those who are, haven't seen those previous two videos and are just coming into this video, I'm still going to give my rundown of it. So just know that even though I'm repeating a lot of things that I said in the last video for the guest star and by introducing them, it's not to demean you guys or talk down to you guys. It's just, I just want to introduce the guest stars to people who aren't familiar with, the Harlem Globetrotters or aren't familiar with their cartoon adaptations. But you guys most likely should be familiar with the Harlem Globetrotters. I mean, even if you're not a basketball fan, like I said in the previous video, they've done, they're not a typical basketball team. They use basketball more as like theater, it's more of an act, but they're not part of a league or anything like the NBA or anything. So they're very much like an entity of their own, and they still do acts to this day, albeit with new members. But for those who don't know, and are just coming into this video and hadn't seen my previous video or the episode 12 review where I go into this version of the Globetrotters, which is the 70s versions, here's just a brief rundown of who the Harlem Globetrotters are. And like I said before, this is not to demean anybody who saw those previous videos. I'm just doing it for these people who are coming into this video, don't know these 70s Globetrotters, and need an introduction to them. So here's a quick rundown of who the Harlem Globetrotters are. So the Harlem Globetrotters were an American basketball exhibition team that were founded in 1926. They combined athleticism, theater, entertainment, and comedy into their style of play. The team consists of 6 members. The first is BJ Bobby Joe Mason, who was born on April 23rd, 1936 in Centralia, Illinois, and he unfortunately passed away on July 4th, 2006 in Springfield, Illinois. Then there's Fred Curly Neal, who was born on May 19th, 1942 in Greensboro, North Carolina, and he unfortunately passed away on March 26, 2020 in Houston, Texas. Then there's Meadowlark Lemon, who was born on April 25th, 1932 in Wilmington, North Carolina, and he passed away on December 27th, 2015 in Scottsdale, Arizona. Then there's J.C. Gibson, who was born in 1932 and unfortunately passed away in 2009. As mentioned in the previous video, I'm not sure when, where he was born during these time frames or where he passed away, but that's all I could find on him. There's Geese Osby, who was born on April 25th, 1938 in Crescent, Oklahoma, and he's the only member still alive to this day at 86 years old. And then, of course, there's Pablo Robertson, who was born in either 1943 or 1944. It's not specified which of these 2 years he was born in. It's also not known where he was born, but he unfortunately passed away on June 23rd, 1990 in Long Island, New York. These were the 6 real members of the Globetrotters. However, all these 6 members did not voice their animated counterparts. Now we get into the animated counterparts of the Globetrotters. So, the Harlem Globetrotters, specifically the Hanna-Barbera incarnations of them, had their own animated show before the new Scooby Doo movies. It was just simply titled the Harlem Globetrotters, and it ran for 2 seasons and 22 episodes from 1970 to 1971. As mentioned in my 2 previous Globetrotter episode reviews, I mentioned that 2 of the members that are, in the show, 2 characters in the show specifically, aren't in these crossover episodes of the new Scooby Doo movies. The first is the mascot dog, Dribbles, who I've mentioned previously that he's in the old school intro of the new Scooby Doo movies. He's popped up in an animation area in the previous episode. But that's really the only appearance he's made. There was a line dropped about him and the other character that was, missing in the first Globetrotters episode review that I mentioned. And then there's the team's coach, which is Granny. She doesn't appear at all. Like Dribbles, she got a line dropped in the first episode, that the Globetrotters crossed over. And then in the last episode, there was an animation error with her and Dribbles in it. And the same thing happened in this episode. And actually, I did notice this time the animation error of Granny and Dribbles in the Globetrotter bus. They did actually show it because it was actually in the forefront, so I was able to notice it. So, even though these 2 characters do make, get a line in the first episode and have, animation errors in these 2, they don't specifically aren't a big part of these episodes. These, like the last episode, it was just an animation error. They never really intended those 2 to be in that shot. They just so happened to be there because Hanna-Barbera had a tendency of reusing stuff to save up on time and money. Now let's get into the voice cast for the Globetrotters. Starting out, we have BJ Mason, who was voiced by Eddie Anderson. Eddie Anderson was born on September 18th, 1905 in Oakland, California, and he unfortunately passed away on February 28th, 1977 in Los Angeles, California. Curly Neal was voiced by Stu Gilliam, who was born on July 27th, 1933 in Detroit, Michigan, and he unfortunately passed away on November 10th, 2013 in the Czech Republic. Meadowlark Lemon was voiced by Scatman Crothers, who was born on May 23rd, 1910 in Terre Haute, Indiana, and he unfortunately passed away on November 22nd, 1986 in Van Nuys, California. Also, fun fact about Scatman, which I mentioned in the previous 2 episode reviews, but I'll still mention it for those who don't know and are new to this, coming into this episode review. Scatman is known for voicing another famous Hanna-Barbera character, which is, of course, Hong Kong Phooey. Then you have Gip Gibson, who was voiced by Richard Elkins. Richard Elkins was born on June 3rd, 1934 in Cleveland, Ohio, and he's the only member of the voice cast that is still alive today at 90 years old. Keith Osby was voiced by Johnny Williams. Not much is known about Johnny Williams. I mentioned this in the previous 2 episode reviews. There's not much information about him, if he, when he was born, where he was born, if he's still alive to this day. Like I said in my previous episode review on IMDb, I believe there's still some listings of him. So I do believe he's still alive, but it's not clear on that front, so that's all I have on him. And then finally, there's Pablo Robertson, who was voiced by Robert Dupuis, who was born on April 20th, 1934 in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and he unfortunately passed away on February 9th, 2008 in Los Angeles, California. Now, after these crossover episodes, the Harlem Globetrotters would get a sequel show to their original show. It was just simply called the Super Globetrotters. It began in 1979, and it ended the same year. It ran for like 1 season and 13 episodes beginning in September of 1979, and it ended in December of 1979. As per usual, I'll be watching Season 2, Episode 1 of the new Scooby Doo Movies on the new Scooby Doo Movies, the Almost Complete Collection. This Almost Complete Collection has every episode of the new Scooby Doo Movies, minus the Addams Family episode, which if you want to know more about, I go more in depth on it in my Season 1, Episode 3 review of the new Scooby Doo Movies. Now, I already talked about this in the last episode review, but for those who are new and are just coming to this video, I am familiar with the Globetrotters. I do know the modern-day Globetrotters specifically, but I'm not aware of the 1970s incarnations of the Globetrotters. For one, I wasn't alive in the 1970s, so I don't know those old members of the Globetrotters. But I've never watched the Hanna-Barbera incarnations of the Globetrotters, because, yes, I do like the Globetrotters. I like seeing their act in person, but I'm not that big of a fan of them. And when it comes to basketball, I'm very much a fan of basketball. You guys know from my second channel, I mentioned this in my previous video, that I'm a Boston Celtics fan. I talk all things, Boston sports on my second channel, and the Boston Celtics are my favorite basketball team. I love playing and watching basketball, so basketball is very much something that I love. I love watching the Celtics. I love playing basketball when I was a kid. I still would love doing it to this day. I haven't played it lately, but I still love, playing it when I do get the chance, and I still love watching it. Specifically watching my team. And I've seen the Globetrotters perform in person, the modern day ones, but like I said, never have watched a cartoon adaptation, Hanna-Barbera cartoon adaptations of the 70s Globetrotters, and I wasn't alive when the 70s Globetrotters were performing, so I don't know them either. So I believe most fans are pretty mixed on this episode. I've heard a mix of opinions on this episode. I've heard some people praise this episode and consider it one of their favorites of the Globetrotter episodes when they're asked, some of their favorites of the new Scooby Doo movies or their favorite of the 3 Globetrotter episodes. And I've heard some other people not being too keen on it and not really big on the episode as a whole. Also, like I mentioned in the previous episode review, the Globetrotters are the only guest stars to get 3 crossover episodes in a Scooby-Doo show. None of the other guest stars from Season 1 are going to make an appearance in Season 2. These are the only guest stars that appear in Season 2, which is another fun fact, is that they're the only guest stars from Season 1 that appear in this season. None of the other guest stars from Season 1 get a second appearance or a third appearance. It's really odd that the Globetrotters, out of all the guest stars that got, more than 1 episode, were the ones chosen to get 3 and get the most guest appearances. Hanna-Barbera really liked the Globetrotters for some reason because they loved having them cross over with Scooby. It's really odd that out of all the guest stars, the Globetrotters were chosen to get 3 crossover episodes. But that's what they got, and they're the only guest stars that got it. And none of the other guest stars in Guess Who, which is a modern day reboot, or, whatever you want to call it, of the new Scooby Doo movies, And nobody in this series of the new Scooby Doo movies gets more than 2 appearances. Globetrotters are the only ones that get the luxury of it. And it's honestly fascinating that not only are these the only guest stars from Season 1 that come into Season 2, probably for familiarity's sake, but they were the ones out of all the guest stars to be chosen to get a 3rd appearance. You know, not the Three Stooges, not Don Knotts, not Batman and Robin. The Harlem Globetrotters got the 3rd one. It's honestly weird, and I'm honestly, I kind of wish that we could have gotten maybe a 3rd episode with Batman and Robin, or Don Knotts, or hell, maybe even give the Three Stooges another crack at it if you wanted to, even though I'm not big on their episodes. Or hell, any of the other guest stars that got 1 episode. But they didn't, and they chose the Globetrotters, and yeah, it's an interesting fact, and it's an interesting thing about this episode. But do I think this is a good Globetrotters episode? As their final episode, does it deliver on the good front? Because the Globetrotters have had varying degrees of success. Their first episode was a dud. It was easily a contender for the worst of the series. Their second one, which was the last episode, was good. It's actually a contender for one of the best in the series. But now we got this 3rd one, and we got people mixed on it, and I didn't go into it with high expectations because I didn't remember it well. And honestly, I don't know what to expect with the Globetrotters when you have 1 good and 1 bad episode. What kind of quality you're going to get with them? They pretty much covered both ends of the spectrum, so it'll be very interesting to see what they cover in this one. But does it fall into the category of being a good episode with with their second appearance? Does it fall in the bad with, their first appearance? Or is it in the middle? And are they going to cover all ends of the spectrum? Well, let's find out, shall we? So let's take a look at the episode to see whether I think it is a good or bad episode of the new Scooby Doo movies. The episode begins with the gang excited to go to Picnic Island. Running out of gas, the mystery machine stops in front of an old fisherman's shack. Heading in to investigate, they realize the shack is empty and search for a phone. Shaggy hears some weird noises from the basement, and they soon discover the Harlem Globetrotters down there playing basketball. The Globetrotters have a big game tomorrow with the Ocean City Scorpions, so the gang decide to invite the Globetrotters on their excursion cruise to Picnic Island, so the Globetrotters fill up the Mystery Machine's gas tank, as well as give the gang a new picnic basket, as Scooby unfortunately decided to eat the whole thing. Thankfully, Shaggy does the right thing of putting a padlock on the basket, making sure Scooby doesn't steal it again. And the 2 groups race towards the Picnic Island excursion boat. Unfortunately, they arrive too late, and the boat has set sail. However, a mysterious figure has moved the boat's boarding sign to an old tanker which the gang board instead, not knowing that this is not the ship that they originally set out to do and that they're late for the boat. Heading out to sea, the gang feels something fishy is going on, but have no escape as the waters are full of sharks, barracuda, swordfish, and octopus. Investigating, Freddy and the girls find a haunted wheel where the ship is being driven by a ghostly invisible figure. Curly believes they are being sea-jacked and taken to Haunted Island. Meadowlark has found an old map of the island, which is how he figured out this mystery. On Haunted Island, the gang are about to crash into a giant rock, so everyone abandons the ship. It is now nighttime, so everyone figures they'll rest and signal ship out in the sea at daytime. They also find an old mansion, so they enter it hoping they can spend the night there. Inside the mansion, the lights are on, so they rush in after being frightened by some bats. The mansion is decorated very creepily with some suits of armor, old portraits, and stuffed animals scattered around the building. We also get floating Aztec statues that haunt Shaggy and Scooby and hold on to their backs. The gang and the Globetrotters split up into separate rooms for a good night's rest. The Globetrotters take one room for themselves and crowd the 6 of them into one bed. And the bed gets even more crowded as Meadowlark wakes up with a suit of armor beside him. The Globetrotters have a tussle with the suit of armor, and they find a secret passage under their bed that leads them to a library where they discover some glowing books. Ripping out all the books, the Globetrotters look for an exit. Meadowlark finds some luminous handprints on the library's shelves that bring them to a clock that doubles as a secret passageway. Shaggy and Scooby also have a ghostly encounter and make a racket so loud that they wake up Freddy, Daphne, and Velma, who go off to investigate after they realize Shaggy, Scooby, and the Globetrotters are missing. What's interesting is that you see Shaggy and Scooby pray before they go to bed, which is probably the first time, maybe only time, where Shaggy and Scooby are shown to have some sort of spiritual beliefs. It's honestly a fascinating detail. I never really thought that Shaggy and Scooby would be the type to be like that, but it would make sense if they're fully on board with the supernatural. They would be on board with, praying to God and hoping that, nothing happens to them. It's just an interesting detail that we never really see. I don't think we ever see get brought up again, of Shaggy and Scooby praying. Also, some of the ghosts are actually really cool and designed well. So I actually think the ghostly encounters Shaggy and Scooby have are some of the best in the episode. Velma finds luminous footprints, so they follow them, hoping they'll find everyone else. Eventually, everyone reunites outside the mansion, and the gang and the Globetrotters spot two ghosts walking into a building who are let in by a third ghost. The gang smoke the ghost out of the building and capture the three ghosts. Unmasking the ghost, it turns out to be the owner of the Scorpions, as well as the coach and trainer of the Scorpions. They said they wanted to keep the Globetrotters awake so they'd be too tired to play the next day. That's an interesting motive, but I'll let them explain it themselves and then explain why I think it's a bit of a inconsistent motive and a poorly executed motive.
We wanted to keep you Globetrotters from sleeping tonight,
so you'd be too tired tomorrow to win the game.
So this motive is pretty unique and different, and actually is a quite interesting motive. But I gotta be honest, it has a lot of holes and inconsistencies in it. First off, basketball games are normally played at nighttime. They're never really played during the day. You might get a couple of afternoon games, but you mostly don't get morning games. So keeping the Globetrotters up at night isn't going to necessarily make them too tired to play the next game. Which is why it doesn't make sense, because once we head on to the scene that starts the basketball game, it is clearly shown to be nighttime. You're telling me the Globetrotters had no time to sleep during the all day to catch up on their 8-hour sleep? That just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, if this had been an early afternoon game, which is something that could work, it's a little bit of a stretch too, but there are afternoon games of basketball sometimes during the weekends. So, which I think the first Globetrotter episode had a day game, so had it been maybe a day game, I maybe could have gone along with the motive, but it's honestly so inconsistent and it doesn't make any sense. Also, surely these guys would be arrested, because they abducted an entire basketball team and these kids and their dog, these 4 teens and their dog, for no reason other than to keep the Globetrotters awake. So yeah, they didn't do harm to them, but they did technically abduct them and take them somewhere they didn't want to go. This whole motive makes absolutely no sense, and there's no reason the Globetrotters should be this tired in the next scene at the basketball game. And there's no reason the owner, the coach, and the trainer should have gotten away with it, because they abducted the whole Globetrotters team. That just isn't going to fly. You'd be arrested for abducting the team like that. That just doesn't work. They also had no idea that the Globetrotters were even going to go to Picnic Island. It was literally a last-minute decision. I think maybe one of the eyes might have overheard them. But it still is a bit weird that they would know that they were going to Picnic Island because, it was a last-minute thing for the Globetrotters. But this motive is just so inconsistent, doesn't make sense, and I just had to break it down because there's no reason the Globetrotters should be tired, and there's no reason the coach, the owner, and the trainer should still be on the team. They should be arrested and put in jail for abducting this entire team and these 4 teens and their dog. They may not have harmed them, but they certainly abducted them and took them on their own accord, not in free will. So that just doesn't fly. But anyways, Daphne figures out that everything was luminous paint, cardboard statues, wires, and sheets. Everything, including the boat, was rigged to work automatically. So, with another mystery solved, the Globetrotters are set to play their next game. Unfortunately, like I said before, some baffling reason, they're somehow tired. So the Scorpions are clobbering them on the court. Like I said, no reason the Globetrotters should be tired. This is a night game. They should have had plenty of time to sleep. Sure, you're not going to be 100%, but you could get an 8-hour sleep even if they kept you up until 5, 6, or 7 in the morning. There is no reason the Globetrotters should be this tired. Absolutely no reason. You had plenty of time to get an 8-hour sleep. But the episode ends on a good note, with the gang using ice cubes to shock them awake, and the Globetrotters make a comeback and win the game. I'm going to give Season 2, Episode 1 of the new Scooby Doo Movies 3 stars out of 5. So yeah, I found this episode to be an average and forgettable episode to start off the second season. Not bad, but certainly not good either. And I'd say it's, now that I've given my rating, pretty much the Globetrotters have covered every spectrum. They have a bad episode, a good episode, and now they have a decent episode. But this has more negatives than positives, so before I get into my negatives and what brings this episode down for me, I'll get into my positives first and explain what works for me in this episode. Starting with the positives, my first one is I think Shaggy and Scooby were really great in this episode. I love Shaggy and Scooby in this episode. They were actually their usual cowardly selves throughout it when spooky things were happening. But I also like that at the Globetrotters game, Shaggy and Scooby were kind of like good motivators in the Globetrotters basketball sequence. When they were sleepy and they needed to make a comeback in the game, Shaggy and Scooby came up with the idea of using ice to help wake them up. And they were the ones kind of motivating them, saying, come on, fellas, you got to make a comeback. So Shaggy and Scooby were quite motivational towards the Globetrotters at that end basketball sequence. And while I didn't like the basketball sequence in the first Globetrotters episode, I feel like it's a little more appropriate here. I still prefer the last episode where there wasn't one at all. But I like that at least this time, it didn't feel shoehorned in. It actually was necessary to the plot because it tied into the villain and its scheme. I will say that it goes on a bit too long, and it's a little, apparently this is how a Globetrotters episode works, where they apparently are down in the first half and then they come back in the second half. I don't know if that's true or not, but if that is the case, it's pretty tedious. They reuse a couple of animations. I will say the highlight of it is Shaggy and Scooby motivating the Globetrotters to come back and win the game. So I appreciate that aspect, but I'm still not a huge fan of the basketball sequence, but it's a lot better here than it is in the first episode. But I think Shaggy and Scooby were great. They were good motivators during the basketball sequence when the Globetrotters needed to make a comeback. And they were the usual cowardly selves throughout the mystery. Then we have the guest stars, the Harlem Globetrotters. How were they? Well, they were pretty good in this episode. They were just as good as they were in the last episode. I felt like, though, surprisingly, this might actually be the strongest the Globetrotters have performed in an episode. Although I prefer them in the previous episode, as guest stars, they're probably at their strongest here because they have good chemistry, not only with each other, but with Shaggy and Scooby as well. Yeah, they had their moments conversing with Fred, Daphne, and Velma, but I don't think they really had chemistry with Fred, Daphne, and Velma. I think the Globetrotters mainly bounced off each other and Shaggy and Scooby well. I also think that they did a good job having them wanting to help solve the mystery, but that was really due to the fact that it was disrupting their sleep. So that they needed their sleep and it was bugging them. So that's why they were more invested in it, because they wanted to find out what was going on and what was, prohibiting them from sleeping. So while the Globetrotters while I prefer them in the previous episodes, not episodes, but the previous episode, I will say that this is their strongest. They have good chemistry with each other and Shaggy and Scooby, and they wanted to help solve the mystery in this episode. So they've hit all the beats that I want out of guest stars. So I think the Globetrotters did a good job in this episode and were well utilized. Next up, we have the atmosphere of the episode. I actually really liked the atmosphere of the episode. It was pretty great. It was spooky and eerie, mainly due to the fact that you didn't know why the villains were taking the Globetrotters and the gang to this island. But also some of the villains' gimmicks were quite creepy. I think the creepiest gimmicks were the ghostly stuff. Like, there was a ghost by the window. Shaggy and Scooby, while they were sleeping in their room, they saw like a ghostly figure, like looking like they were sewing something while they were on a rocking chair. The clock was moving odd. When they were outside and needed to get back inside the house, Shaggy ended up on top of a floating ghost, which took him to the same tree that Scooby ran to after he saw the floating ghost. And so I think the atmosphere worked because of like the dark, spooky night. You're on and you're and you have these villains who are taking you to an island, secluded island. You have no idea where you are. You're in the middle of the ocean on this secluded island. It's dark out. It's completely nighttime. You don't know what these villains are up to. What are they planning to do? What they're capable of. Your only option is to sleep at this creepy ass mansion, surrounded by woods, on this secluded island. And there's all this creepy statues, stuffed animals, and these ghostly shit, going all around you. Honestly, it's all creepy, and it lends itself well. And I think, what works in this episode is the gimmicks the villains use and the setting itself. That's what I feel enhances this atmosphere. Being forcefully taken to an island, you don't know where you're going. Like, you haven't, this is not where you were planning to go. You're being forcefully taken to a secluded island in the middle of the ocean, where there's, you got all these different water animals like sharks and barracudas and all that. And you're stranded on there because your boat pretty much crashed. You don't know who brought you here or what they're planning to do with you. It's dark out. You see this old creepy mansion surrounded by woods on this island. You go inside and you see all these creepy happenings going on. Ghostly apparitions and shit. Creepy statues, stuffed animals, stuff moving and shit like that. It's all quite creepy, and I think that's what really helps enhance it. I'll get on to why I'm not particularly fond of the villains themselves, but their gimmicks worked, and I felt enhanced the atmosphere of the episode, as well as just the secluded nature of the setting itself. So overall, the atmosphere was strong, it was great. I really felt the spooky, eerie vibes of this episode. And my final positive is the setting of the episode. Tied into what I said previously, the setting was great in this episode. Like I said, the secluded, creepy nature of the setting was awesome. You're on, it's this creepy, secluded island that you're being forcefully taken into. You're in the middle of the ocean. No boat, no way of getting off this island. You have to wait for help until morning. So you have to stick out the night on this creepy-ass island. You have this typical spooky, creepy, Scooby-Doo-esque mansion that is abandoned. And has all these creepy happenings going along with the woods surrounding it. And then add on the villain's creepy gimmicks that they use in the mansion, as well as the surrounding woods. And you have quite a strong, creepy setting. It's a little bit similar to, I would say, A Night of Fright is No Delight, but the island's much bigger than A Night of Fright is No Delight. Like, A Night of Fright is No Delight, it looks like a rock. It looks like a house that's, on a rock, just secluded in the middle of the ocean. This is more of an island, but it works because you got this creepy island in the middle of the ocean. It's secluded. You have no way of going back to land. Yeah, you got brought here by unknown villains that, you don't know what they're planning to do to you. There's this creepy mansion there that's abandoned, and all these creepy stuff happening in the mansion. All because of the villain's gimmicks. And then the surrounding woods around it. It just all works together. This is what I picture a Scooby-Doo setting to be, and it blends all the good Scooby-Doo type of settings that I would want. So I believe this is a strong, creepy setting. It works effectively. I love the whole secluded nature of the setting. It definitely works. But now, that's all I got for positives, though. So I think it's about time we get on to the negatives of the episode. and what my issues are with it. Starting with the negatives, my first one is I found Fred, Daphne, and Velma all to be weak in this episode. Daphne had like a little bit of cowardice, but not enough for me to consider like her as cowardly as Shaggy and Scooby in this episode. Fred had no leadership in this episode and no piecing together any clues in the episode. So the leadership really was the Globetrotters, specifically Meadowlark. I felt like Meadowlark was more of the leader in this episode than Fred was. Fred barely did anything at all. And Velma's the same way too. She wasn't a leader, and she didn't piece together any clues to help solve the mystery. So they kind of were just there and didn't really do much. Yeah, they helped Shaggy and Scooby out with, trying to keep the Globetrotters up at the end, but I think Shaggy and Scooby mostly did a lot of the heavy lifting in this episode when it came to the gang. I just wasn't really happy with Fred, Daphne, and Velma, how they were utilized in this episode. I think they felt like background characters and didn't feel as necessary to the plot as they should be. So I wish they would have done a better job at utilizing Fred, Daphne, and Velma, and it's honestly a shame that they weren't used more effectively in this episode. Next up, we have the villains of the episode. Now, excluding all the gimmicks that I mentioned, the main villains of the episode were weak and dull. So they never actually get a name, but they're just invisible men, that are mostly invisible in this episode. But when they have a physical form towards the end, when you do see it, they just look like generic white cloak Ku Klux Klan members. They look like, that's basically what they look like. They look like they're wearing like Ku Klux Klan member robes, that are completely generic. They're not menacing or scary. They're not fun or entertaining. They barely make a presence in this episode. And because they're invisible, I guess the idea of an invisible villain, it could be a fun gimmick, but I don't think they really pulled it off in this episode, and I think they were just kind of lame. They didn't really do anything. They just were. The whole point of their plan was to keep them up, so they weren't really trying to hurt them or anything. But I never felt any danger towards these villains. They weren't really scary. They didn't. It was more their gimmicks that I found more creepy and scary than them themselves, because they didn't really do anything. They just were there and very dull and weak and boring, and our costumes were very generic, just these white-cloaked Ku Klux Klan member type outfits. Very strange, very odd choice. It just didn't work for me. I just didn't like these villains. They didn't do anything. They felt pointless in the episode. And they were mostly invisible for the episode, so I didn't get any sort of I didn't get to see them physically, and they didn't really do anything that really made me, enjoy them being invisible. I believe there will be invisible villains in Scooby-Doo down the line, so maybe this gimmick might work one day. But in this episode, I didn't think it worked. I just didn't think it worked at all. These villains were very forgettable, very weak, very dull. Outside of costume, we never really got to see the Scorpions owner, the Scorpions coach, and the Scorpions trainer at all. And that attributes to the amount of suspects in this episode, which is another issue that I'll get onto a little later. But we never see these guys outside of costume. We know the Globetrotters are playing the Scorpions, but we never meet the team beforehand. We never meet their coach, their owner, their trainer. We never get to know them as people. We don't know what's driving them to do it. Obviously, they want to win the game, but this is a pretty drastic measure that they're going to. So, one would think, like, what is their driving force for trying to do this drastic measure now? Do they have some resentment towards the Globetrotters? Is there something there? Like, it's just never explained. So we never get to see these guys outside of costume and understand them and, learn more about them behind the mask. So, yeah, completely weak outside of costume. Never got to see them. Never got to know anything about them. Then we have the motive of the episode, which I thought was very poorly executed. So the motive is that, like I said in the review, they wanted to keep the Globetrotters awake so they would lose the game and the Scorpions would end up winning the game against the Globetrotters. Now, that sounds like a unique and cool motive, but it's executed very, very poorly. There should be no reason why these villains succeeded in the end. No reason. Even if they, like, you know, their mission should not have been a success. Like, yeah, they could have kept the Globetrotters up at night, but, you know, that doesn't change the fact that the Globetrotters had plenty of time to sleep. I mean, like I said in the review, basketball games are normally played at night. And in the episode, it's shown that this is a night game. So even if you kept the Globetrotters up until 5, 6, or 7 in the morning, they have plenty of time to you know, sleep before they have to play their game. So there's no reason why the Globetrotters should be this sleepy. Now, there are some afternoon games sometimes during the weekends. There's never any morning basketball games, so that's completely out the window. If this had been a day game, like an afternoon game, it would still be a bit of a stretch, but it would have worked a lot better. But because this is a night game, it makes absolutely no sense how the Globetrotters would be this sleepy and the villains would succeed in their plan. Also, these three men should have not gotten away with the, you know, scot-free with their, you know, crime whatsoever. They basically abducted 4 teens, a dog, and an entire basketball team against their own free will. That would get you in jail. I don't care what your intentions are, even if you weren't planning to hurt them, you took them against your free will, and you kept them on that island. How are they not behind a jail cell? They were completely, you know, abducting the whole Globetrotters team, the 4 human members of the gang, as well as Scooby, against their own free will. That's a crime. There's no reason they should be on the side of the court, you know, laughing and be happy that they succeeded. That just wouldn't work. So the bottom line is that there's no reason this motive should have worked. Okay? No reason why this motive should have worked. Even if they had tweaked it to a day game, that still would have been an issue, because they would have been caught and they would have gone to jail because they abducted them. I think that this plan needed to be changed a little bit. I like the idea of them sabotaging some aspect of the Globetrotters to make them lose the game. But this was not the right motive to do that with. Keeping up the Globetrotters up all night isn't going to change anything. They have plenty of time to sleep, and you abducted them, so you're going to jail for it, especially if you get caught. And the fact that they didn't go to jail for it is baffling to me. So this motive is completely inconsistent, completely illogical. There's no reason they should be getting away with this motive. No reason they should have succeeded in this motive. And it makes absolutely no sense why the Globetrotters would be this tired at a night game when they had plenty of time to sleep. This motive makes no sense whatsoever. Awful motive. Poorly executed. I like the idea that they're going after the Globetrotters and trying to sabotage the game to where they can win it, but they needed a better idea. Even if they had tweaked it to a day game, it still would have been an issue of, well, they abducted them anyways. So that's still an issue. They just needed to tweak this motive and make it something different. Like I said, idea's good. I like the base of it, having a motive centered around the Globetrotters, but you gotta make a logical motive. Something that works. Something that actually would be worthwhile. Because even if they had gotten away with it, the Globetrotters still would have had enough time to sleep. So, it just doesn't matter. Their plan was so flawed and made absolutely no sense. Poorly executed motive, like the idea, but they needed to create something different for this motive. There were no suspects throughout the episode whatsoever. None at all. We never met anybody besides the Globetrotters and the Scooby Gang. So we had no chance to guess these guys as the villains. There was nobody else besides them. Nothing. There was no way to tell who the villain was. Yeah, the Globetrotters mentioned the game against the Scorpions, but the Globetrotters talk about basketball games all the time. That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean I would expect them to be suspects. Had they shown them, then I would have considered them suspects, but they didn't. So, I think it's a shame they didn't have suspects in the episode. I wish I could have guessed these men, or, you know, guessed, like, which members of the team were behind it, you know, it would have been interesting, but they didn't do that. So, yeah, weak on the suspect front. No suspects at all in this episode. Next, I found the mystery to be poorly executed in this episode. Now, there was a mystery here, and the mystery was why are these ghosts, these villains, whatever you want to call them, targeting the Scooby Gang and the Globetrotters? Why are they specifically targeting them? Why are they taking them to this island? What's the point of it? And this should be an interesting mystery, but because of the answers we get with the whole motive and everything, and how it was poorly executed with the motive and the answers that we got, and because the episode didn't really present the mystery in an engaging way, I just felt overall this mystery was just not really executed to its full potential. I like the idea of the mystery. It could have been good, but the answers we got and the way it was presented, I just didn't feel it. I just wasn't invested in this mystery, and I didn't think it was that good. So I feel like they could have done a better job executing this mystery. But it was there. And my final negative is that there were no clues in the episode whatsoever. No clues to point towards any sort of suspects, despite the fact that we didn't have any suspects in this episode at all. No clues to point towards a motive. Absolutely nothing. The gimmicks don't count because those come after the villains are, you know, unmasked, so doesn't matter. But yeah, we have no clues in this episode to point towards anything, so, you know, that also hinders the mystery too. The fact that there's no way to pinpoint towards a person or a suspect or towards a motive. I wish they had provided some clues in this episode. We've been lacking some clues for the past couple of episodes. They really need to bring some clues back, because it's honestly feeling like they're just forgetting to even put a clues and mystery in these episodes. But I'm hopeful they will. But right now, they haven't done it yet. So, overall, guys, I would not recommend this episode to fans and newcomers of the show. It has some good in it, and, you know, it does definitely have some positives in it that, you know, do work. But for the most part, it's just ultimately an average and forgettable episode that's held back by a lot of negatives, including weak villains, weak gang members, and a weak and poorly executed mystery and motive and all that. And this episode is just overall average and forgettable. It's not the worst, but it's definitely not the way you want to start a season off. They didn't start it out with a bang, but they didn't start it off too bad either. They just kind of started it off with a pretty forgettable episode, and I can see why I don't really return to this one often. There's just more problems with it than there is good, and honestly, what really saved it was how they utilized Shaggy and Scooby, the Globetrotters themselves, and the atmosphere and setting. If even one of those were bad, I think I would have been content to give this a 2. Thankfully, they had enough positives to keep them in the 3 threshold, but they were really close to being a below-average episode. Now, it still wouldn't have been as bad as the first one, but I think overall, when it comes to these Globetrotter episodes, I personally would recommend the previous one. I think episode 16 is the best of the Globetrotters episodes. Then I would go to this one, which is the second best, and then the third one, which is the first episode, which I think is the third one and the worst one of the 3. So, I mean, if you're wondering which Globetrotter episode you should pick, I personally would say pick episode 16 of season 1. I think the Loch Ness Mess did the Globetrotters the best, and the Globetrotters have a varying amounts of success and degrees of success in these episodes. So you guys can go judge for yourself if you feel differently about any of these episodes, but I personally wouldn't recommend it. Go watch the previous one. It's much better Globetrotters episode, and a much better Scooby Doo episode in general than this one. It's just, this one's just very average and forgettable. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give it a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the episode. Do you like this episode? Do you see more positives in it than me? Do you consider it the best of the Globetrotter episodes? Maybe you consider it, you know, better than, you know, someone like me does. Do you hate this episode? I'd be interested in that as well. Do you consider it on par with the first Globetrotter episode? Do you think it's worse than that? Or are you somewhere like me where somewhere in the middle like me where you think it's, you know, average and it's decent, but it's quite forgettable and not the best representation of the Globetrotters and not one of the better Scooby Doo episodes? I'm curious for your thoughts, so let me know. And subscribe for more Scooby Doo content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content, obviously I'll have plenty more Scooby Doo content on the way. This is a Scooby Doo focused channel. And even though this is the final video of Scooby Month, we'll be continuing more Scooby Doo reviews into October for my Halloween special. Even though the novelization reviews won, they're not ready yet, and I'll be lucky if I'll be able to get one of them up. So I'm gonna give the people who to not have a drought of content, I'm just gonna continue with the Scooby Doo reviews until the novelization review of the original Alien film is ready to go. But yeah, Scooby Doo will still be focused on plenty more after my Halloween special. In fact, it's going to be the main focus. And in fact, after this video goes up in a couple days, I'll make a update and an announcement on what the future of the channel will be, and it'll be good news for Scooby Doo fans. You know, I'm going to be talking about what direction I'm going to take this channel, which is, you know, let's just say it's going to be more Scooby Doo focused and more Scooby Doo oriented than the past. But I'll talk more about that in my community post, you know, when I update you guys. So that concludes my 2024 Scooby Month. But we'll be moving on to my 2024 Halloween special. And in my next video, I will begin my 2024 Halloween special with a review of Season 2, Episode 2 of the new Scooby Doo Movies, titled The Haunted Showboat, guest starring Josie and the Pussycats. Oh boy, this is going to be an interesting episode to talk about because Josie and the Pussycats are one of Scooby-Doo's most famous clones. Copycats, if you will. One of Hanna-Barbera's most famous, you know, copycats or clones of Scooby-Doo. So I'm quite excited to see how they gel with the Scooby-Doo gang. I remember actually enjoying this episode. I've gone back to it a few times, so I have high expectations going into it. Scooby-Doo's going to meet one of his clones and copycats. And while I've never seen the Josie and the Pussycats show before, that's what I've been told, that a lot of the elements from Scooby-Doo, you know, the original elements were incorporated into Josie and the Pussycats, like the musical band element. So it'll be interesting to see how Josie and the gang, you know, team up with Scooby and the gang and how their dynamic will be. But I have some good expectations going into it, and we'll see how it goes. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, peace out.
Scooby, Scooby Doo, looking for you. Scooby, Scooby Doo, where are you? All the stars are here, waiting for you. Couldn't have a show